Elara lived in a world woven from hushed paper and the salty breath of the sea. Her shop, the Compass Rose, was nestled on the quieter end of Oakhaven's cobbled Main Street, a place where time seemed to slow, allowing the rustle of turning pages and the distant cry of gulls to fill the air. Inside, the scent of aged parchment mingled with cedar and a faint, sweet aroma she could never quite place. Perhaps the ghost of forgotten tea leaves or the lingering essence of ancient inks. She specialized in the restoration of antique maps and rare books, a meticulous art that demanded patience, a steady hand, and an almost reverent respect for history. Each faded chart, each leather-bound volume, held not just ink and paper but stories, of intrepid journeys, of whispered secrets, of lives lived long ago. Elara didn't just mend tears and reinforce spines. She listened to these stories, piecing them together as she pieced together the fragments of a crumbling map. Her own life, by contrast, was a quiet, predictable affair. Mornings began with the first blush of dawn painting the sky outside her attic apartment above the shop, a mug of chamomile tea warming her hands as she watched the fishing boats leave the harbor. Days were spent bent over her workbench, her magnifying glass revealing the intricate details of a 16th-century chart or the delicate script of a forgotten poet. Evenings wound down with a simple meal, a good book, and the rhythmic lullaby of the waves against the shore. It was a life she cherished, rich in solitude and purpose, yet sometimes, in the quietest hours, a subtle yearning would stir within her, a whisper of a desire for something more. Oakhaven itself was a town steeped in maritime history, its charm residing in its weathered clapboard houses, its bustling fish market, and the enduring spirit of its seafaring folk. But for decades, one landmark had stood as a silent testament to time's neglect: the Oakhaven Lighthouse. Perched majestically on the rugged cliffs overlooking the harbor mouth, its whitewashed tower was now chipped and peeling, its lantern dark and lifeless. It had been decommissioned long ago, deemed obsolete in the age of modern navigation, and had slowly crumbled into a beautiful, melancholic ruin. Then, like a sudden gust of wind carrying news from distant shores, the announcement came. The Oakhaven Lighthouse was to be restored. A private historical foundation, funded by an anonymous benefactor, had taken on the monumental task. The town buzzed with excitement, a collective cheer for the revival of their beloved beacon. Elara felt a peculiar thrill, too, a warmth spreading through her chest. The lighthouse had always held a special place in her heart, a silent sentinel she'd often gazed at from her window, imagining the lives it had guided, the storms it had weathered. Its restoration felt like a promise, a beacon of hope in itself. A few weeks later, on a Tuesday morning thick with the promise of rain, the bell above the door of the Compass Rose chimed, a sound Elara usually associated with Mrs. Gable from the bakery, needing a new ribbon for her spectacles, or young Leo from the school looking for a treasure map. This time, however, the silhouette filling the doorway was broader, taller, and entirely unfamiliar. He stepped inside, bringing with him the fresh scent of sawdust and sea air. He was a man built for purposeful work, with strong shoulders and hands that looked both capable and gentle. His hair, the color of rich earth, was slightly disheveled, as if he'd just run his fingers through it in thought, and his eyes, a clear, intelligent gray, swept around the shop with an easy curiosity. He wasn't loud or boisterous. His presence was a calm, steady hum. "Good morning," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that surprised Elara with its quiet power. "I hope I'm not disturbing anything." Elara, who had been meticulously cleaning a 17th-century celestial chart, felt a faint blush creep up her neck. She was accustomed to the predictable rhythm of her days, and this man was an unexpected chord. "Not at all," she replied, her voice a little softer than usual. "Welcome to the Compass Rose. Can I help you find something?" He smiled, a slow, genuine curve of his lips that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I hope so. My name is Finn O'Connell. I'm the lead contractor for the lighthouse restoration project." Elara's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, welcome to Oakhaven, Mr. O'Connell. That's wonderful news." "Please call me Finn," he said. "And thank you. It's quite a project, a real honor. We're trying to restore it as authentically as possible, get it as close to its original state as we can, and that's actually why I'm here." He gestured vaguely around the shop. "I was told this was the place for anything old and, well, accurate in." Elara chuckled softly. "We certainly try our best with accuracy. What exactly are you looking for, Finn?" An old map, he explained, stepping closer to her counter, his gaze lingering on the intricate details of the charts displayed on the walls. Specifically, a very early navigational chart of Oakhaven Bay and the surrounding coastline. The older the better, ideally from the late 1800s, when the lighthouse was first designed and built. We have some blueprints, but a detailed map of the coastal features from that era would be invaluable for understanding the original intent of its placement, the shipping lanes it was meant to guide. Alara's brow furrowed in thought. That's a very specific request. Most of the early Oakhaven charts are quite rare, especially in good condition. They weren't always preserved with the same care as, say, a world atlas. She walked over to a tall, narrow cabinet filled with rolled parchment, her fingers tracing the labels. I do recall acquiring a collection of local maritime documents a few years back. They were in extremely poor shape, almost beyond salvaging. But there might have been something... Yes. She pulled out a long cylindrical tube, its cardboard yellowed and brittle. Carefully, she uncapped it and slid out a tightly rolled piece of paper. It unfurled with a soft crackle, revealing a large, discolored chart, its edges frayed, its surface marred by water stains and countless small tears. The ink was faded in places, almost ghostly, but the hand-drawn lines of the coastline, the faint soundings and the tiny, elegant script marking Oakhaven Harbor were still discernible. And there, near the mouth of the bay, was a small, detailed depiction of the lighthouse, newly erected, its beam a delicate ray of hope. "This is it," Alara murmured, a thrill running through her. "Or at least, I believe it is. A chart of Oakhaven Bay dated 1892. It's an original, I'm certain. But as you can see..." She gestured to the extensive damage. "It would be an immense undertaking to restore it. It's incredibly fragile. There are sections where the paper is so thin, it's almost transparent. I'd have to carefully separate the layers, clean each piece, deacidify, mend, and then reassemble. It could take weeks, perhaps months." Finn leaned closer, his gray eyes scanning the map with an intensity that matched Alara's own. He didn't flinch at the damage, nor did he dismiss it. Instead, he seemed to see past the flaws to the history held within. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice soft with reverence. "Even like this, you think you can do it?" Alara met his gaze, a spark of challenge and determination in her eyes. "I believe so. It would require my full attention, and it would not be cheap, nor quick. But if anyone can bring this back, it would be me." She said, it not with arrogance, but with the quiet confidence of a master craftsman. Finn smiled again, a slow, appreciative smile that reached his eyes. "I have no doubt. You have the look of someone who doesn't shy away from a challenge, especially when it involves bringing something precious back to life. Consider it commissioned. Take all of the time you need. We're not in a rush to compromise authenticity." "We're not serious." He pulled a small notebook and pen from his pocket. "What's your name, by the way? I seem to have forgotten to ask." "Alara Vance," she replied, feeling a warmth spread through her at his easy trust. "Alara," he repeated, tasting the name. "It suits you, like a whispered secret." He wrote something down. "I'll be in touch, and feel free to call if you need anything, or if you just want to talk about progress." He handed her a card with his number and the Foundation's details. With a nod and another quiet smile, he turned and left, the chime of the bell echoing in the sudden silence he left behind. Alara stood for a long moment, looking at the fragile map, then at the card in her hand. Finn O'Connell. The lighthouse. An immense project. Her quiet life had just been infused with a new, unexpected current. The days that followed fell into a new rhythm, one subtly altered by Finn's presence, even when he wasn't physically there. Alara immersed herself in the restoration of the 1892 Oakhaven chart. It was indeed a monumental task, demanding every ounce of her skill and patience. She worked with tiny scalpels and brushes, with custom mixed adhesives and ultra-thin Japanese paper, painstakingly cleaning away centuries of grime and mending each delicate tear. It was slow, meditative work, and as she worked, she often thought of Finn, of his quiet intensity, his deep respect for the object she was restoring. He started visiting the shop every few days, not just for updates but for something more. He'd arrive in the late afternoon, usually after his own work at the lighthouse, his clothes smudged with plaster dust or paint, his hair a little wilder. He'd bring her a steaming mug of tea from Mrs. Gable's bakery, or sometimes a piece of the bakery's famous apple tart. He never interrupted her work, never demanded her attention. He would simply sit on the old wooden bench near the window, sketching in his notebook, or sometimes just watching her, his gaze thoughtful and warm. Elara found herself anticipating his visits. The subtle chime of the bell, the scent of sawdust, the quiet presence he brought into her world. It all began to feel less like an intrusion, and more like a welcome counterpoint to her solitude. She would find herself sharing little details about the map, about the challenges of a particular section, or the discoveries she made. A tiny, almost invisible penciled note in the margin, or a faded watermark. "See here," she pointed one afternoon, her finger hovering over a particularly tricky section. "This area was almost completely lost. I had to use historical tide charts to accurately reconstruct the sandbars. It's like being a detective, piecing together clues from the past." Finn leaned over her shoulder, his proximity a comfortable warmth. "A fascinating detective," he murmured. "You have an incredible eye, Elara. Not just for detail, but for the story behind the detail." His words, spoken so gently, resonated deep within her. It wasn't just a compliment, it was an acknowledgement, a recognition of the very essence of her passion. She felt a blush rise again, but this time it was less from fluster and more from a feeling of being truly seen. One evening, a particularly blustery one, rain drumming against the window panes, Finn stayed later than usual. They had been discussing the precise placement of a buoy on the old map, and the conversation had drifted into the history of Oakhaven's fishing fleet. He hadn't brought dinner, and the air was getting chilly. "You must be hungry," Elara said, surprising herself with the words. She rarely offered more than tea to her customers, let alone a meal. "I was just about to make some soup. There's plenty." Finn looked up from his sketch, his gray eyes warm. "That's very kind of you, Elara. I wouldn't say no. I think I've been breathing plaster dust all day." And so, for the first time, they shared a meal in Elara's small, cozy kitchen above the shop. The soup was a simple lentil, hearty and warm, and the flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows on the walls. The conversation flowed easily, no longer confined to maps or lighthouses. He spoke of growing up in a small town much like Oakhaven, of his love for working with his hands, for bringing old structures back to life. "There's something deeply satisfying about it," he said, stirring his soup. "Taking something that's been neglected, something that seems beyond repair, and giving it new purpose, new life. It's not just about the bricks and mortar, it's about the soul of the place." Elara nodded, understanding completely. "It's the same with the maps and books. They hold so much history, so much of humanity's journey. To mend them is to honor that journey, to ensure their stories can continue to be told." She paused, then, feeling a sudden openness she hadn't anticipated, added, "Sometimes I feel like I'm doing the same for myself." Finn looked at her, his gaze gentle and probing. "What do you mean?" She took a breath, the words coming out in a soft, almost whispered confession. "I've always been a quiet person, content in my own company with my books and my work. But there was a time, after I lost my parents, that the quiet felt too loud, like an emptiness. This work had helped me fill that space not with noise, but with purpose. It taught me to find beauty in what was broken and to patiently put it back together. Like a whisper of hope, I suppose." She gave a small, self-conscious shrug. "My parents loved the sea. They taught me to appreciate the stories it held, the way it shaped lives." Finn listened intently, his expression one of deep understanding. He didn't offer platitudes or try to fix her past. He simply listened, a silent anchor in the quiet room. "I understand," he said, his voice as soft as her own. "That kind of loss, it leaves a mark. But it also shapes us, doesn't it? Teaches us what truly matters." He reached across the table, and for a fleeting moment, his hand covered hers, a warm, comforting pressure. "It sounds like they would be very proud of the beautiful work you do, Elara, and of the person you've become." The simple sincerity of his words, the warmth of his touch, sent a shiver through her. It wasn't a romantic gesture, not explicitly, but it was a gesture of profound connection, of empathy and shared humanity. It made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in a very long time, seen not just as the meticulous restorer, but as Elara, the woman with a quiet longing and a gentle heart. As the weeks turned into a month, the 1892 Oakhaven chart slowly, meticulously, came back to life under Elara's expert hands. The faded inks were gently coaxed back to vibrancy, The tears seamlessly mended, the fragile paper given new strength. It was almost finished, a testament to her dedication and skill. And with each delicate stroke, the connection between Elara and Finn deepened, a subtle, unspoken understanding growing between them. He still came to the shop, his visits now a familiar, comforting part of her routine. Sometimes he would bring her sketches of the lighthouse, architectural details he was particularly proud of, explaining the challenges of sourcing period-appropriate glass for the lantern room, or the painstaking work of restoring the old Fresnel lens. He talked about his dreams for the lighthouse, not just as a historical monument, but as a vibrant part of Oakhaven once more, perhaps a small museum, a community space. He spoke with a quiet passion that mirrored her own. Elara, in turn, found herself sharing more, opening up about her own aspirations for the Compass Rose, the joy she found in unearthing forgotten histories, the satisfaction of preserving beauty. Their conversations were like two quiet streams, flowing parallel, sometimes merging, always enriching. One late afternoon, the map finally lay complete on her workbench, perfectly restored. It was a masterpiece of restoration, a window into Oakhaven's past. Finn arrived just as the last rays of the setting sun streamed through the window, bathing the shop in a golden light. He walked over to the workbench, his breath catching as he saw the finished map. He knelt, his fingers tracing the coastline, his eyes devouring every detail. "Elara," he breathed, his voice filled with awe. "It's magnificent. You've brought it back to life, truly." He looked up at her, his gray eyes shining. "It's even more beautiful than I imagined. Thank you." Elara felt a flush of pride, but more than that, a deep sense of shared accomplishment. "It was a pleasure, Finn. A real privilege to work on." He rose, still gazing at the map, then turned to her, a different kind of light in his eyes. "This map," he began. "It's not just for the lighthouse project anymore. It's a treasure. And you're an artist, Elara. A true master of your craft." He paused, then, his voice dropping to a softer, more intimate tone. "I was wondering, now that this is done, if you might allow me to show you the lighthouse. The real lighthouse. It's starting to take shape, and I think you'd appreciate seeing it in person. Perhaps we could go this weekend? I could even pack us a little picnic." He looked at her, a hopeful, gentle question in his eyes, a silent invitation to step out of her quiet shop and into a new chapter, a chapter where the whispers of history might just lead to the blossoming of something truly beautiful between them. Elara's breath hitched, a soft sound she hoped Elias didn't notice. The warmth from his gaze felt like the first rays of spring sun after a long winter, melting something she hadn't even realized was frozen within her. A picnic. A lighthouse. With Main. It was an invitation to something more than just a transaction, more than a historical consultation. It was an invitation to connection, to shared beauty, to a weekend adventure that felt utterly novel and deeply appealing. "A picnic," she repeated, her voice a little softer than intended. A small smile played on her lips, a genuine one that reached her eyes. "Elias, that sounds wonderful. Truly. I would love to go." Relief washed over Elias's face, quickly followed by a bright, open smile that made her heart flutter. "Wonderful," he echoed, his voice filled with a quiet joy that was infectious. Then it settled. "This Saturday, if that works for you?" "Saturday would be perfect," Elara confirmed, already picturing the day in her mind. The thought alone brought a lightness to her step as she moved to the counter, gathering the blueprints. "I'll be here as usual, or where would you like me to meet you?" "Oh, I'll pick you up," Elias said without hesitation, a subtle possessiveness in his tone that Elara found surprisingly pleasant. "It's a bit of a drive, and then a bit of a walk. I'd rather you just relax and enjoy the journey." He reached for the blueprints she handed him, their fingers brushing for a fleeting moment. A spark, tiny yet potent, arced between them. Elara pulled her hand back a fraction too quickly, a blush creeping up her neck. "All right then," she managed, her gaze dropping to the intricate etchings on the old documents. "Saturday it is." He lingered for another moment, his presence filling the small space of her shop with an energy she hadn't realized was missing until now. "Thank you, Elara, for everything. For the help, and for saying yes." His voice was low, sincere. "Thank you, Elias," she replied, finally meeting his gaze again. "For asking." He nodded, a final lingering look, then turned and exited the shop, the chime above the door announcing his departure. Elira watched him go, a wistful sigh escaping her lips. The shop felt quieter now, but not empty. It felt expectant. The rest of the week passed in a haze of anticipation. Elira found herself humming as she worked, her thoughts drifting from antique restoration to picnic menus and the rugged beauty of the island coast. She chose an outfit with unusual care, a comfortable linen dress in a soft coastal blue, sturdy walking sandals, and a wide-brimmed straw hat. She packed a small canvas bag with a book, a sketch pad, and a light shawl, just in case the sea breeze turned chilly. Friday night, she found herself surprisingly restless. The quiet solitude of her evenings, usually a balm, now felt like a prelude to something exciting. She brewed a cup of chamomile tea, but her mind was too busy replaying Elias's gentle smile, the earnestness in his eyes, the way his voice softened when he spoke of the lighthouse. He was unlike anyone she had met in years, grounded, passionate, with a quiet strength that was both comforting and intriguing. Saturday dawned bright and clear, the sky a vast expanse of cerulean blue, dotted with fluffy white clouds. A perfect day for an adventure. Elira felt a flutter in her stomach, a nervous excitement she hadn't experienced since she was a teenager. She checked her reflection one last time, smoothing her dress, making sure her hair was tucked neatly under her hat. Exactly at 10 o'clock, a familiar truck pulled up outside her shop. Elias emerged, dressed in a simple t-shirt that highlighted the strength of his arms, comfortable cargo shorts, and hiking boots. He carried a large woven picnic basket in one hand and a sturdy canvas bag in the other. He looked rugged, handsome, and undeniably happy to see her. "Good morning, Elira," he greeted, his smile warm and genuine. "Ready for our great escape?" "More than ready," she replied, her own smile matching his. She locked the shop door behind her. "Lead the way, Captain." He chuckled, a rich, pleasant sound. "Aye, aye, first mate. My truck awaits." He opened the passenger door for her, a gesture that felt old-fashioned and charming. As she settled into the seat, she caught the scent of fresh coffee and something sweet, hinting at the delights within the picnic basket. The drive was lovely. They left the bustling main street behind, winding through narrow country roads bordered by ancient stone walls and verdant fields. Elias pointed out landmarks, shared anecdotes about the island's history, and asked about her own journey to this quiet corner of the world. Elira found herself opening up, sharing stories of her passion for antiques, the thrill of uncovering forgotten histories, and the peaceful satisfaction she found in her quiet life. She even spoke a little about her past, about a relationship that had ended with a whimper, leaving her hesitant to trust again. Elias listened with an attentive, empathetic gaze, never interrupting, only offering a soft, understanding nod. "It sounds like you found your true calling here, Elira," he said thoughtfully, his eyes on the road. "And a true home." "I think I have," she admitted, a wistful smile touching her lips. "And you, Elias, what brought you to this particular island to build lighthouses?" He paused for a moment, his hands steady on the wheel. "It's a long story, but my grandfather was a lighthouse keeper. Not on this island, but on one much like it, further north. He filled my head with tales of the sea, of storms weathered, of the quiet vigil of the light. He taught me to work with my hands, to respect the power of the ocean, and the importance of guidance, both literal and metaphorical." He glanced at her, a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "After he passed, I felt a pull back to the coast, to build something meaningful, something that honored his legacy. This particular lighthouse, the one I'm working on, it's a recreation of one he often spoke of. A real architectural marvel that was lost to time and a particularly fierce storm over a century ago. It's been my passion project for years." Elira felt a profound sense of understanding blossom within her. His lighthouse was not just a structure, it was a tribute, a piece of his heart. "That's beautiful, Elias," she said softly, genuinely moved. A wonderful way to honor him. He offered her a grateful smile. "Thank you, it means a lot to me." Eventually, the paved road gave way to a gravel track, and then a winding dirt path that led them through a dense thicket of wind-sculpted trees. Elias parked the truck beneath the shade of an ancient oak, its branches gnarled and strong. "From here, it's a short walk," he announced, grabbing the picnic basket in his bag. And then, the reward. The walk was indeed short, but breathtaking. They emerged from the trees onto a rugged cliff path, the air immediately saltier, cooler. Below them, the ocean stretched out, a dazzling expanse of sapphire blue, crashing against the rocks with a rhythmic roar. Seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries echoing in the vastness. And there, perched majestically on a rocky promontory, stood the lighthouse. It wasn't just a structure, it was a sentinel, rising proudly against the sky. Even unfinished, it possessed an undeniable grandeur. The stone base was already solid and imposing, hinting at the graceful taper that would eventually rise to its lantern room. Scaffolding still clung to its sides like a metallic spiderweb, but even through the skeletal framework, Alara could discern the intricate stonework, the carefully carved details that whispered of dedication and artistry. It looked ancient and new all at once, a bridge between two eras. Alara gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Elias, it's magnificent. It's even more incredible than I imagined from the blueprints." His face lit up with pride, a genuine, unguarded joy. "Isn't she? She's coming along. I try to get out here every day, even if it's just to stand and look at her, to plan the next steps." He led her to a secluded, grassy spot a little distance from the lighthouse, nestled against a low ridge that offered shelter from the wind and an unparalleled view of the ocean. He spread a thick tartan blanket on the grass, then carefully unpacked the picnic basket. And what a picnic it was. There were crusty baguettes, an assortment of local cheeses, thinly sliced prosciutto, olives marinated in herbs, and a vibrant green salad bursting with fresh vegetables. For dessert, there were homemade lemon tarts and a thermos of fragrant coffee. It was clear he had put immense thought and effort into every detail. "Elias, this is extraordinary," Alara said, her eyes wide with delight as he laid out the feast. "You've outdone yourself." He shrugged modestly, a faint blush on his cheeks. "Just a few things I threw together. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I aimed for variety." He poured her a cup of coffee, the aroma mingling pleasantly with the salty air. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the crashing waves, the calls of the gulls, and the gentle clinking of cutlery. Alara savored every bite, the food tasting even better in the fresh sea air, surrounded by such breathtaking beauty. She watched Elias as he ate, his movements unhurried, his gaze often drifting to the lighthouse, a quiet reverence in his eyes. "So," Alara began after a while, dabbing her lips with a napkin, "tell me about the real lighthouse, the one your grandfather spoke of." Elias leaned back, propping himself up on an elbow, his eyes sparkling as he began to speak. "It was called the Whispering Light, built in the late 1700s, renowned for its unusual acoustics inside the tower. Supposedly, you could hear the sea's whispers even at the very top. It was innovative for its time, designed to withstand the fiercest storms. But one winter, a century and a half ago, a storm of unprecedented ferocity struck. The island was battered for days. When the skies cleared, the Whispering Light was gone swallowed. When the skies cleared, light was..." He paused, a hint of sadness in his voice. "My grandfather always believed some trace of it remained, a part of its spirit. He passed on the stories the architectural drawings had found, the legends. He always said, 'Someone needs to bring the Whispering Light back, son. Someone needs to listen for its voice again.'" Alara listened, captivated by his storytelling, by the depth of his connection to this lost piece of history. "And you're that someone," she murmured. "You're bringing it back to life." "I'm trying," he said, his gaze fixed on the rising stone tower. "It's a massive undertaking, sourcing the right materials, replicating the old techniques, understanding the engineering challenges of that era. It's consumed me for years, but it's a good kind of consuming." He turned his head to look at her, his expression softening. "It means a lot that you're here, Alara, that you understand what this means to me. Most people just see a construction project." "I see passion," she corrected gently, meeting his gaze. "And dedication. I see a man honoring his past by building a future. It's more than just a lighthouse, Elias. It's a dream made tangible." His smile was slow, grateful, and deeply appreciative. "You do understand, don't you?" That's really something." He reached out, his fingers gently brushing over the back of her hand, a feather-light touch that sent a shiver through her. "Thank you for seeing that." The touch lingered, a silent current flowing between them. Elara felt her heart quicken, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the sun. She looked into his eyes, and in their depths she saw not just admiration, but something deeper, something akin to burgeoning affection. "Shall we go take a closer look?" Elias finally suggested, breaking the spell, though his eyes still held a lingering intensity. "I can show you the stonework, the initial designs for the lantern room, the foundation work we've completed." "I would love that," Elara said, her voice a little breathy. He helped her up, his hand warm and firm on her arm. They walked towards the lighthouse, the ground beneath their feet uneven and rocky. Elias moved with a confident stride, navigating the terrain with ease, occasionally offering Elara a steadying hand over particularly tricky patches. Each time their hands met, a subtle electric hum resonated between them. As they approached the structure, the sheer scale of his undertaking became even more apparent. Elias explained the various stages of construction, pointing out the ancient techniques he was employing: dry stacked stone where possible, traditional mortar mixes, the way the base was designed to withstand the relentless assault of the waves. He showed her the intricate patterns of the stones, how each one was meticulously chosen and placed, fitted together like pieces of a giant, ancient puzzle. "This stone, for example," he said, tracing a finger over a particularly beautiful piece of granite, flecked with mica. It was sourced from a quarry just a few miles inland, the same quarry that provided stone for many of the island's oldest buildings. It has a beautiful resilience, a strength that mirrors the purpose of the lighthouse itself. Elara ran her own hand over the cool, rough surface. "It feels alive," she murmured, "as if it remembers its past." Elias smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. "Exactly. That's what I love about it. It's not just building, it's resurrecting." He led her inside the unfinished base, where the air was cooler, filled with the scent of damp earth and fresh stone. The circular walls soared upwards, already hinting at the majestic spiral staircase that would one day lead to the top. "We're still working on the interior support structures," he explained, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "But I wanted you to see the true scale, the heart of it." He gestured upwards, to the gaping hole where the next sections of the tower would rise. "Imagine, Elara, the light, piercing through the darkest night, guiding ships home." Elara looked up, her imagination soaring. She could almost hear the whispers of the sea, echoing within these very walls, just as Elias's grandfather had described. She could envision the powerful beam cutting through fog and storm, a beacon of hope. It was more than a structure. It was a testament to human resilience, to the enduring need for guidance and connection. She turned to Elias, her heart full. "It's remarkable, Elias, truly. You've poured your soul into this, haven't you?" He nodded, his gaze fixed on the rising walls, a profound sense of purpose radiating from him. "Every bit of it. It's more than a job. It's a calling. I want it to stand for centuries, a silent testament to the past, a steadfast guide for the future." As he spoke, a stray beam of sunlight pierced through an opening in the scaffolding, illuminating his face. His eyes, already expressive, seemed to glow with an inner fire. In that moment, Elara saw not just a craftsman, but a visionary, a man deeply connected to the earth, the sea, and the echoes of history. And in that same moment, she realized with a jolt that she was falling for him. Softly, gently, but undeniably. They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the site. Elias showed her his preliminary sketches for the lantern room, explaining the precise optical requirements for the light. He spoke of the challenges of working with the elements, the occasional setbacks, and the sheer joy of seeing his vision slowly take physical form. Elara offered insights from her own knowledge of historical architecture, pointing out parallels she'd seen in old drawings, offering suggestions for the interior details based on her understanding of the period. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, a harmonious blend of shared passion and mutual respect. As the sun began its slow descent towards the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, they made their way back to their picnic spot. They sat side by side on the blanket, watching the spectacle of the sunset over the vast, shimmering ocean. A comfortable silence settled between them, a silence rich with unspoken understanding and burgeoning emotion. "Thank you, Elias," Elara finally said, her voice soft, barely above a whisper. "This has been one of the most beautiful days I've had in a very long time." He turned to her, his profile silhouetted against the fiery sky. "The pleasure has been all mine, Elara, truly. Sharing this with you, it makes it even more special. It feels right." His words, simple yet profound, resonated deep within her. She felt a profound sense of belonging, a feeling she hadn't realized she was missing until now. She stole a glance at him and found his gaze already on her, warm and tender. He reached out, his hand gently covering hers, his thumb stroking her skin in a slow, comforting rhythm. "I feel like I've known you for years," he confessed, his voice low, almost a murmur against the sound of the waves. "Even though it's only been a few weeks, there's something about you, Alara. Something that draws me in." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She couldn't find the words, so she simply squeezed his hand, a silent acknowledgement of her own growing feelings. The air between them thrummed with unspoken emotions, with the promise of something truly beautiful. As the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a soft, ethereal glow, Elias finally stirred. "We should probably head back before it gets too dark," he said, a hint of reluctance in his voice. Alara nodded, a sigh escaping her lips. She didn't want the day to end. But as they packed up the picnic, their hands brushing often, their eyes meeting in lingering glances, she knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The drive back was quieter than the journey out, but it was a comfortable, contented silence. The moon, a sliver of silver in the darkening sky, began to cast its gentle light over the landscape. Elias occasionally glanced at her, a soft smile on his lips, and Alara found herself returning it, a warmth blooming in her chest. When they arrived back at her shop, the streetlights cast long shadows. Elias walked her to the door, carrying her small bag. He handed it to her, his fingers brushing hers once more. "Thank you again, Elias," she said, looking up at him. His eyes were dark in the dim light, but she could still see the warmth in them. "My pleasure, Alara," he replied, his voice a low rumble. He hesitated, then took a small step closer. I had a wonderful time. I hope you did too." "More than wonderful," she assured him, a genuine smile gracing her lips. He paused. Then, with a gentle boldness that took her breath away, he reached out and cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing softly against her skin. "Good night, Alara." "Good night, Elias," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He leaned in, and for a fleeting, heart-stopping moment, she thought he would kiss her. Instead, he pressed a soft, chaste kiss to her forehead, a gesture so tender, so respectful, that it melted any remaining defenses she might have harbored. It was a promise, not a demand. He pulled back slowly, his eyes searching hers, a silent question in their depths. Alara's gaze met his, open and vulnerable. A soft, knowing smile touched his lips, and then he turned and walked back to his truck, leaving her standing there, a joyful tremor running through her. She watched until his taillights disappeared down the street, then unlocked her shop door and stepped inside. The familiar scent of old books and polished wood greeted her, but tonight it felt different. It felt imbued with the fresh tang of sea air, the lingering aroma of coffee, and the subtle warmth of Elias's presence. Alara closed her eyes, pressing her fingertips to her forehead where his lips had touched. A quiet sigh of contentment escaped her. Her heart felt full, lighter than it had in years. She hadn't realized how much she'd yearned for this kind of connection, this gentle, earnest affection, until Elias had walked into her shop. She wandered through her shop, her gaze lingering on the various antiques, each piece holding its own story. Now, she felt like she was part of a new story, one that was just beginning to unfold. Elias. The lighthouse. The quiet understanding that had bloomed between them on a windswept cliff overlooking the sea. The next morning, Alara awoke with a sense of buoyant anticipation. The memory of the picnic, the lighthouse, and Elias's gentle kiss lingered like a sweet dream. She made herself a cup of tea, then sat by her window, looking out at the sleepy town. The world seemed brighter, more vibrant. Later that day, as she was dusting her shelves, the chime above her shop door announced a visitor. It was Martha, her next-door neighbor and a beloved island gossip, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Well, Alara, dear," Martha began, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "You look positively radiant this morning. I saw Elias's truck pick you up yesterday. A lovely day for a drive, wasn't it?" Alara felt a blush creep up her cheeks, but she met Martha's gaze with a genuine smile. It was Martha, Absolutely lovely. Elias took me to see the lighthouse he's building. Martha's eyes widened. Oh, the whispering light. He's really pouring his heart and soul into that, isn't he? A proper artist, that one. And such a good, kind man. Did you enjoy your picnic? Elara chuckled. More than I can say. He's truly remarkable. She realized, as she spoke the words aloud, just how deeply she meant them. Elias was remarkable. Martha beamed. I always knew you two would hit it off. The way he looked at you the first time he came in, like he'd found a lost treasure. It was plain as day. She leaned in conspiratorially. So, when's the next date, dear? Elara laughed. A light, happy sound. We haven't discussed it yet, Martha, but I certainly hope there will be one. As if on cue, a message arrived on her phone. A text from Elias. Her heart did a little flip. Good morning, Elara. Just wanted to say thank you again for a truly wonderful day yesterday. I was thinking there's an old coastal path near the lighthouse that offers a different perspective, and it's perfect for finding some ancient sea glass. Would you be interested in exploring it sometime this week? Perhaps a sunset walk? Elara's smile widened, a warm glow spreading through her. Sea glass. A sunset walk. Another invitation, another step forward. That sounds absolutely perfect, Elias, she typed back, her fingers flying across the screen. I'd love that. She looked up, meeting Martha's knowing gaze. Soon, Martha, she said, her voice filled with quiet delight. Very soon. Martha clapped her hands softly. Wonderful. Well, don't keep a good man waiting, dear, and tell me all about the sea glass when you find it. She bustled out, leaving Elara with a heart full of hope and the exciting promise of another adventure with Elias. The story of the whispering light was far from over, and Elara knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that her own story with Elias was just beginning to unfold, as rich and intricate as the history she so cherished. Elara's heart fluttered like a trapped bird as she changed into her favorite linen dress, a soft seafoam green that matched the hue of the ocean on a calm day. Martha's words echoed in her mind, "Don't keep a good man waiting." The phrase brought a blush to her cheeks. A good man. Yes, Elias certainly was. And the adventure of the whispering light, the hunt for the sea glass, felt less like an academic pursuit and more like a treasure map leading directly to him. She met Elias at the base of the lighthouse, the late afternoon sun casting long golden shadows across the cobbled path. He wore a simple chambray shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, and trousers that seemed to have known many a sea breeze. His smile, as always, was a slow, warm unfurling, reaching his kind, perceptive eyes. Ready for our quest, historian? He asked, his voice a low rumble that sent a pleasant shiver down her spine. More than ready, keeper, Elara replied, her voice a little breathier than she intended. She clutched the canvas bag she'd brought, filled with a small trowel, a sketchpad, and a thermos of Martha's spiced tea. Practicalities for a romantic treasure hunt. They walked along the winding path that led down to the secluded cove Elias had mentioned. The air was crisp, carrying the salty tang of the sea and the sweet scent of wild roses clinging to the cliffs. As they descended, Elias pointed out various rock formations, sharing local lore about shipwrecks and ancient fishing grounds. Elara listened, captivated not just by the stories, but by the way his eyes lit up when he spoke of the sea, his passion a mirror to her own for history. The cove itself was a hidden gem, cradled by towering cliffs that shielded it from the main currents, creating a calm, almost mystical pool of water that glowed emerald in the afternoon light. The tide was out, revealing a stretch of shingle and smooth, water-worn stones. They say the sea glass only appears at certain tides under certain moons, Elias mused, kicking idly at a cluster of pebbles. And always after a storm, but this is the calmest day we've had in weeks. Elara's brows furrowed in thought. Perhaps it's not just about the storm, but what the storm reveals, she suggested. Legends often have layers. What if it's about a particular kind of light, or an exposure that only happens when the sand shifts? They began their search, walking slowly along the waterline, eyes scanning the ground. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and lavender, reflecting off the wet stones. The silence between them wasn't awkward, but companionable, filled with the gentle lapping of waves and the distant cry of gulls. Elara found a perfect piece of frosted emerald glass, smooth as a worry stone, and held it up. Not the one, but beautiful all the same. Elias reached out, his fingers brushing hers as he took the glass. His touch sent a spark through her, warm and undeniable. "It is," he agreed, his gaze lingering on her face for a moment longer than necessary. "It reminds me of your eyes when you're thinking deeply." A blush bloomed on Ilara's cheeks. She quickly looked away, pretending to scan the beach, her heart thrumming. He noticed her. He really noticed her. Hours passed. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky awash in deep twilight. They hadn't found Uanfi sea glass, the legendary piece that was said to glow with an inner light, but they had found dozens of other treasures, smooth, colorful fragments, polished by the ocean's ceaseless embrace. They sat on a driftwood log, sharing Martha's tea, the thermos warm between them. "No glowing glass tonight," Elias said, a hint of wistful disappointment in his voice. "But a wonderful search nonetheless," Ilara countered, genuinely. She looked at him, silhouetted against the fading light, his profile strong and contemplative. "I have learned more about this cove, and a little more about you, than I ever could from a book." He turned his head, and their eyes met. "And about you, Ilara. You see the magic in things, even when they're not obvious. It's refreshing." His smile was soft, genuine. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for inviting me," she whispered. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, with the nascent promise of something profound. As they walked back up the winding path, the stars began to prickle the inky sky. Elias took her hand, his grip firm and warm, a silent gesture that felt more significant than any declaration. Ilara's fingers intertwined with his, and a profound sense of rightness settled over her. The sea glass might still be hidden, but she was beginning to feel like she had already found a treasure beyond measure. Over the next few weeks, their nascent connection blossomed. Ilara found herself drawn to the lighthouse, not just for her research, but for Elias. She'd bring him freshly baked scones from Martha's bakery, or share her latest discoveries from the town archives, watching his face light up with interest. He, in turn, would share stories of his life at sea before becoming a lighthouse keeper, tales of distant ports and stormy nights, always with a quiet reverence for the ocean. He took her on a tour of the lighthouse, from the intricate gears of the lamp mechanism to the dizzying height of the lantern room, where the powerful beam swept across the darkening sea. Standing beside him, watching the light arc across the waves, Ilara felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced anywhere else. It wasn't just the history of the place, it was the presence of the man beside her. One evening, after a particularly fruitful day of research where Ilara had unearthed an old mariner's logbook detailing forgotten fishing routes, they sat on the small porch of Elias's cottage, overlooking the churning sea. The air was cool, carrying the scent of rain. "You know," Elias began, tracing the rim of his mug, "before I came here after the last ship, I thought I'd lost my way. I thought I'd just live out my days watching the light, keeping to myself." His voice was low, tinged with a vulnerability Ilara hadn't heard before. It was a good life, a quiet life, but it was solitary. Ilara reached out, gently covering his hand with hers. "What happened with the last ship, Elias?" she asked softly, sensing a deeper story there. He hesitated, then sighed. "A rogue wave, a terrible storm off the Grand Banks. We lost the vessel and a good friend. I was first mate. I made it to a life raft, but I felt responsible, like I hadn't seen something, hadn't done enough. He squeezed his eyes shut briefly. "That's when I decided to drop anchor, so to speak, to stand on solid ground and make sure others found their way home." Her heart ached for him. The quiet strength she admired in him was born of deep sorrow and resilience. "You saved lives, Elias," she said, her voice firm. "You guided people to safety. That's what you still do, here at the light." He looked at her, his blue eyes searching hers. "And you, Ilara, you've shone a light into a very quiet corner of my life." The words hung in the air, potent and sincere. Ilara felt tears prick at her eyes. She leaned closer, resting her head on his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her gently against him, and she felt the steady beat of his heart against her ear. It was a moment of profound intimacy, a silent promise exchanged under the watchful gaze of the lighthouse. Despite their growing closeness, the legendary sea glass remained elusive. Elara pored over her texts, delving deeper into the whispering light legend. The old tale spoke of it appearing only when the heart of the sea calls to the heart of the land, or when true love's promise is made under the moon of the maiden's kiss. These poetic phrases were charming, but offered little practical guidance. Then, one rainy afternoon, while sifting through a box of forgotten lighthouse logbooks, Elara stumbled upon a small leather-bound journal tucked beneath a stack of official reports. It was titled, "In Faded Ink, New Musings of a Keeper's Daughter." The entries were dated from the mid-19th century, written by a young woman named Isabel, the daughter of a lighthouse keeper. Isabel's entries were filled with observations about the weather, local gossip, and, most intriguingly, her secret courtship with a young fisherman named Thomas. Their story mirrored the legend of the Whispering Light, a forbidden love, a promise made by the sea. One entry, dated October 27th, caught Elara's eye. "Thomas brought me a gift today, a small piece of glass, smooth and green as the deep sea. He found it near the old shipwreck, where the twin currents meet. He said it glows faintly in the darkest hours, a beacon for our love. He asked me to keep it safe, to always remember our promise. He leaves tomorrow with a fishing fleet. He said he will return when the moon is full and the tide is highest, and we'll place. He said he will return when the moon is full and the tide is highest, and we'll play." Another entry, weeks later, much fainter and smeared with what looked like tears. "Thomas never returned. The storm was fierce. I went to the cove, to the place where the currents meet, and I searched, but the sea keeps its secrets. I laid his gift, the glowing glass, on the highest point of the rocky outcrop there, hoping its light would guide him home, wherever he may be. I left it where the sea could reach it at the highest tide, and the moon could kiss it in its fullest phase. A promise unfulfilled, but a love undying." Elara gasped. This was it, the true story behind the legend, and the precise conditions for finding the sea glass. Not just any sea glass, but Isabel's sea glass, imbued with the sorrow and enduring love of a forgotten romance. The old shipwreck, where the twin currents meet. Elias had mentioned a spot like that, a treacherous area known for its swirling waters. Highest point of the rocky outcrop, where the sea could reach it at the highest tide, and the moon could kiss it in its fullest phase. She immediately called Elias, her voice trembling with excitement. "I think I've found it, Elias. I've found the key to the sea glass." He met her at her cottage within minutes, his brow furrowed with curiosity. As she read him Isabel's tragic entries, his expression shifted from curiosity to profound understanding. "The twin currents," he murmured, running a hand through his hair. "That's the treacherous point near the Devil's Teeth rocks. Most fishermen avoid it, but there's a small, sheltered pocket of the cove just beyond. A high outcrop that only gets fully submerged during the highest spring tides, or during a particularly strong storm surge. And a full moon," Elara added, looking at her calendar. "The next full moon is in 3 nights, and the tide charts show a spring tide, one of the highest of the year." A thrill, both exhilarating and slightly daunting, coursed through her. This was their chance. Their real chance. That night, a storm began to brew. The wind howled around the cottage, rattling the windows, and the sea roared with a fierce intensity. Rain lashed down, turning the world outside into a blurred watercolor. Elara watched the lighthouse beam slice through the darkness, a steady, comforting presence against the wild night. Elias called her, his voice a little strained over the wind. "Are you all right, Elara? This is a bad one." "I'm fine," she assured him, clutching the phone. "But Elias, what about the sea glass?" Isabel mentioned a storm surge. "Could this be it?" A pause. "It's dangerous, Elara," he said, his tone serious. "The Devil's Teeth are no place to be in this kind of weather, even at low tide. The waves are monstrous." "But what if it's now or never?" she pressed, a desperate urgency in her voice. "What if the storm, combined with the spring tide and the approaching full moon, is the perfect confluence? The legends always speak of storms." He was silent for a long moment. "Meet me at the lighthouse just before dawn," he finally said, his voice resolute. "The storm should be at its peak, and the tide will be turning. We'll be careful. We'll go together." Elara's heart pounded with a mix of fear and exhilaration. "Together," she echoed, a quiet promise. The pre-dawn hours were a maelstrom. Elara bundled herself in waterproof gear, her heart a drumbeat against her ribs. The walk to the lighthouse was a battle against the wind and rain, but the thought of Elias, waiting for her, propelled her forward. He was there, wrapped in a heavy oilskin coat, his face grim but determined. The lighthouse beam cut through the swirling mist and rain, a solitary sentinel. "Ready?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the storm's roar. Elara nodded, her jaw set. "Ready. Dornyor." They descended the cliff path, each step treacherous on the slick rain-soaked stones. The roar of the waves grew deafening as they approached the cove. The small sheltered area was no longer calm. Massive waves crashed against the cliffs, sending spray high into the air. The Devil's Teeth rocks were barely visible through the mist, their jagged points swallowed and revealed by the churning foam. "The outcrop is just beyond those rocks," Elias shouted, pointing. "We'll have to time the waves. It's too dangerous to go now." They crouched behind a larger boulder, waiting, watching the relentless rhythm of the sea. Elias held her hand, his grip a reassuring anchor in the chaos. Elara felt a strange sense of peace amidst the storm, a profound trust in the man beside her. After what felt like an eternity, the tide began to recede slightly, and the most violent of the waves seemed to lessen, though the sea remained a formidable force. "Now," Elias said, pulling her to her feet. "Stay close, follow my lead." They moved quickly, scrambling over slippery rocks, dodging the retreating wash of the waves. The air was thick with salt spray and the smell of ozone. Elara could feel the power of the ocean thrumming through her very bones. They reached the outcrop, a jagged finger of rock that jutted out into the sea. Even now, with the tide receding, the lower parts were being continually swamped by powerful waves. Elias scanned the rock face, his eyes narrowed against the spray. "Isobel said the highest point," Elara yelled, pointing to a small, relatively flat ledge near the very peak of the outcrop, just above the reach of the highest waves. Where the moon could kiss it. They carefully made their way up, finding handholds in the rough stone. The wind tried to tear at them, but they pressed on, fueled by determination. Elias reached the ledge first, then helped Elara up beside him. The spot was barren, swept clean by countless tides. There was no obvious sign of the sea glass. Elara's heart sank. Had they come all this way, braved this storm, for nothing? "Look closely," Elias urged, his voice strained. Isobel said she and lading it there. "Perhaps it's hidden in a crevice or under a small stone." They began to search, their fingers numb with cold, their eyes straining in the dim, storm-like dawn. Elara ran her hand over a small indentation in the rock, almost perfectly circular, nestled between two larger protrusions. It was filled with sand and tiny pebbles. She carefully brushed them away, her breath catching in her throat. And there it was. A small, smooth piece of sea glass no bigger than her thumb. It wasn't glowing brightly, not yet, but it possessed an ethereal, almost milky luminescence, a faint inner light that seemed to pulse softly even in the dim, stormy light. It was a deep, captivating blue, the color of the deepest ocean, yet it shimmered with hints of green and violet when she tilted it. It felt ancient, imbued with history and emotion. "Elias," she whispered, holding it up, her voice thick with emotion. He leaned closer, his eyes wide with wonder. "You found it, Elara. You actually found it." As he spoke, a miraculous thing happened. The storm, as if having fulfilled its purpose, began to abate. The wind lessened, the rain eased to a drizzle, and a sliver of pale silver light broke through the heavy clouds, touching the sea glass in Elara's palm. And it glowed out. A soft, clear blue light emanated from the glass, pulsing gently, filling the small space around them with an otherworldly shimmer. It was breathtaking, more beautiful than any legend could describe. It felt like a small, ancient heart, beating with love and longing. Elara looked from the glowing glass to Elias, her eyes filled with awe and something deeper, something she couldn't quite name but felt with every fiber of her being. "It's real," she breathed. The whispering light. Elias reached out, his hand trembling slightly as he touched the glowing glass, then cupped her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, pressing the warm, pulsing light against her palm. "Isobel's love," he murmured, his gaze fixed on the glass, then rising to meet hers. "And Thomas's promise." His eyes, the color of the sea on a clear day, were filled with an intensity that took her breath away. "And ours, Elara." The words hung in the air, more powerful than any storm, more radiant than the legendary light. Elara's heart swelled, overflowing with a feeling so profound it made her knees weak. This wasn't just about finding a relic, it was about finding each other. Ours, she echoed, her voice thick with emotion, tears finally streaming down her face, mingling with the rain and sea spray. He leaned in, his lips finding hers, a soft, tender kiss that tasted of salt and rain and the promise of forever. It was a kiss that sealed their bond, a silent vow made under the watchful eye of the newly revealed sun and the still-present, magical glow of the sea glass. The world, for that moment, ceased to exist, replaced by the warmth of their embrace and the shimmering light of their shared discovery. They stayed there for a long time, holding the glowing glass, watching the last vestiges of the storm recede, giving way to a new, clearer day. The light from the sea glass slowly faded as the sun rose higher, but its magic lingered, a warmth in Alara's palm, a memory etched into her soul. As they carefully made their way back down the treacherous rocks, Elias kept a firm grip on her hand, never letting go. The legendary sea glass, now resting safely in Alara's canvas bag, felt like a tangible representation of their journey, their shared history, and their unfolding future. Over the next few days, the town buzzed with news of the storm and the strange, beautiful calm that followed. Alara and Elias shared their discovery with Martha, who clapped her hands with delight and declared it the most romantic thing she'd ever heard. Alara decided to dedicate a section of her upcoming book on local history to Isobel and Thomas, and the enduring legend of the Whispering Light. She included a photograph of the sea glass, taken in the exact moment it had glowed, a testament to its magic. She also ensured that the story ended, not in tragedy, but in hope, in the cyclical nature of love and the sea. And as for her own story with Elias, it was only just beginning. One clear, star-filled evening, Elias led her back to the lighthouse. They climbed the winding stairs, their footsteps echoing softly in the silence, until they reached the lantern room. The powerful light swept across the sea, a familiar and comforting rhythm. He turned to her, his eyes serious but filled with a gentle warmth. "Alara," he began, taking her hands in his. "My life here at the lighthouse, it's always been about guiding others home. But since you arrived, I've realized I want to build a home of my own, with you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. He opened it, revealing not a diamond, but a delicate silver pendant crafted in the shape of a lighthouse, with a tiny, perfect piece of the deep blue sea glass set within its lantern. It glowed faintly, a soft, internal luminescence. "This isn't just Isabel's sea glass," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "I took a small shard from it after we found it and had it set. It's a piece of our story, Alara, a piece of the Whispering Light, to remind us of the magic we found together and the light we bring to each other's lives." He knelt before her, his gaze unwavering. "Alara, will you marry me? Will you make this lighthouse, this town, this life, our home?" Tears welled in Alara's eyes, a joyous flood. She didn't hesitate. "Yes, Elias, 1,000 times yes." He rose, pulling her into a fierce, tender embrace. The silver lighthouse pendant, with its glowing heart of sea glass, nestled against her chest as he kissed her, a kiss filled with all the promises of forever. They were married on a warm, sunny afternoon a few months later, at the base of the lighthouse, with Martha beaming as the maid of honor and the gentle lapping of the waves as their soundtrack. Elias continued his work as the lighthouse keeper, his duties now shared with a lightness in his step and a joy in his heart. Alara, in turn, found her place, not just as a historian, but as a keeper of their shared history. She established a small local museum, documenting the stories of the town, its people, and of course the enduring legend of the Whispering Light, with Isabel's journal and a replica of the sea glass as its centerpiece. Their home, Elias's small cottage by the sea, was transformed into a warm, inviting haven, filled with books, maps, and the countless pieces of sea glass they had collected together, each one a tiny memory of their walks along the shore. The original, magical piece of sea glass, Isabel's legacy, resided in a place of honor on their mantelpiece, a constant reminder of the incredible journey that had brought them together. Every evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, they would walk to the lighthouse, hand in hand, and watch Elias turn on the light. The powerful beam would sweep across the darkening sea, a symbol of guidance, of hope, and of the enduring love that illuminated their lives. Elara would lean her head on Elias's shoulder, listening to the gentle hum of the lamp, the distant cry of the gulls, and the steady beat of his heart. The story of the whispering light was no longer just an old legend. It was their story, a living, breathing testament to a love found, a promise kept, and a future brighter than any star, guided by the unwavering light of their own hearts. And as she drifted off to sleep each night, nestled safely beside Elias, Elara knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that their adventure was truly just beginning.